सर्वधर्मान् परित्यज्य मामेकं शरणं व्रज.
The miseries of material existence and the most hopeless conditions of life is the best possible opportunity to turn to God.
Barerupa Bhakti presents The Gift of Desperation, a Bhakti recovery podcast. This is a 12-step based Bhakti-oriented space. Here we share our experience, strength, and hope in the spirit of recovery from addictions and associated behaviors. Welcome. Woo, hello. How you doing? I've got like a really great guest today. I was on his podcast not but a week ago, not even a week ago, a few days
that's
ago.
Right. Yeah.
An incredible human being. I'm really honored to have met him, and we still can't figure out how we met. But before I go on, blah, 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 let's introduce our guest. His name is Greg Mead. He is the co-founder of Sriponya, the host of Sriponya's One Breath podcast, a recovering alcoholic,
Oh, yeah.
and a fellow traveler and spiritual seeker. Am I correct?
Thank you, Jiva G. I've never been introduced so eloquently. It's beautiful.
Welcome. I'm so glad you're
beautiful.
here. It's so nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, I was thinking, this conversation is Jiva G and Greg 2.0, and it's how cool is that? Yeah.
It's 2.0. Oh, we really had if you guys want to check out that podcast, you go to Sriponya. Can you direct people where to go to listen to your podcast?
Yeah, it's on Apple, Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, and it's under Sriponya's One Breath.
Great.
Yep.
That is fantastic. So tell me a little bit, first of all, about Sriponya. What is Sriponya?
Yeah, Sriponya, actually, I'll share what it means.
Yes, please.
The word actually comes from two different languages. The first, of course, for those of us that have had a little bit of familiarity and acquaintance with Sanskrit, Shri means beautiful, resplendent. And my wife and I, who is the other co-founder of Sriponya, were on a call one day with a gentleman, a funder from Swahili, and he was asking us about the name. And so we were talking about it a little bit. And he said, well, it's really interesting because Ponya in Swahili means healing or cure.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So, we don't mean to appropriate two different languages, but we feel we've been gifted with that name of, Sriponya, which means beautiful healing.
I love it.
And we do a lot of work in prevention, intervention, and recovery.
Fantastic.
One of our projects this summer, we're going to be working with 3 youth on the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs in Central Oregon. And working with 3 youth to teach them how to produce their own podcast.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And also,
what do you mean by 3 youth? Is that an organization?
No. We're going to have 3 young people that we're going to be working with a local filmmaker here on the reservation.
Oh, fantastic.
And working with them to, develop communication skills, leadership skills, the ability, like you and I are experiencing right now, that capacity and ability to sit with another human being and connect at a heart level. That's our goal anyway. That's our intention.
It's beautiful.
And then we also we have a sports agility program that the president and CEO of Sriponya has with young people, which is more of a prevention approach. engage kids in, moving their bodies and giving them a greater possibility than heading down the road to using drugs and alcohol.
So Sriponya is, what's the full name? Sriponya
Sriponya Collective.
Collective. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And then we have an acronym, PIRS, PIRS, which means Prevention, Intervention, and Recovery Services.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. What motivated you to do that, to make and to establish
Yeah. In
and to
2000,
found
in,
this?
in 2018, I moved to Central Oregon, and met my wife, and we met in the rooms of 12 step, a couple of,
Fantastic.
so we 13 stepped one another.
Well, if she was a newcomer, then you 13 stepped her.
No. In
then
fact,
it was no 13
yeah.
step.
In fact, at the time, the joke was,
Yeah.
she had 14 years of sobriety and working a diligent program of recovery. And I had 7 years, and
so she was robbing the cradle.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So if anybody was 13 stepping somebody, it wasn't
It was
me.
her.
Yeah.
I love it.
So we met in recovery, and realizing we have been in the world long enough to have experienced the fact that it's not just drug addicts and alcoholics that are suffering from, self-sabotaging, destructive behaviors. But there are other things in addition to substance use and substance abuse that we probably, if we're willing, have the invitation to step into our own deeper sense of coming home to ourselves, which is, in essence, that's what recovery is.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. It's kind of how I see it as well. In the Bhakti Recovery Group, we kind of do the same, have the same, addiction is addiction, whether it's, addiction to self-destruction, it's not just about the alcoholic, it's the associated behaviors as well.
The obsession for drugs and alcohol, it went away pretty quick, but those what we refer to as underlying causes and conditions, relationships, codependence, all of that stuff that probably had drugs or alcohol be our medicine. We were suffering prior to putting a substance in our body for the first time. And the relief we received from that, for me, it was medicine for a long time.
That makes a lot of sense. There's so many layers to that. I think, I heard once someone say, the drugs and alcohol were my solution. They weren't a problem. That wasn't the problem. It was the solution, which in time became the problem.
It can't be said any better than that. I think many, many people will identify with that for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So going into, in 2018, you founded,
no, we met in 2018.
Yes. So when did you guys found Sriponya Collective?
It was birthed as an idea and a desire in 2019, and then we actually launched it in 2021.
Oh, wow. Right in the pandemic.
Yeah.
That's great. I love it. The pandemic was, I don't want to be strange, but I have to say that was one of the most marvelous times of my life. Not disrespecting people who have died in that and all of that. I just mean from my own personal journey. It was a very, very pivotal time in my life, very important time in my life. So I think a lot of things were birthed during that time. Bhakti Recovery Group was also birthed during that time.
That's really interesting. Out of the darkness comes the light. That's
exactly. Yes.
the phoenix rising out of
I would
the
just,
most,
yes.
out of the most desperate, place in the darkest place we could conceive of. If we're just
Mm.
willing to wait, the light
If
begins
we're
to
just
dawn.
willing to wait. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
So, so you guys, so you two have been going forward with this and
Mhm.
you do the podcast. How often is your podcast? Is it once a day? Is it every day or is it a couple
No,
times a week?
we try to do it once a week.
Once a week.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
because I'm also working the tribe, the confederated tribes here approached me with the possibility and the invitation to come and work in recovery here on the reservation. So, yeah,
That's amazing.
I came out of retirement and have a full-time job, which I haven't had in a while.
Well, I guess it's not really even a job now, is it? It's
No,
really it's a service that
yeah, it's
you've been so
beautiful.
fortunate
Yeah.
enough to maybe be compensated for. I don't know, but
Mhm.
the compensation, even if it's not financial, giving service to others, other people who are sick and suffering, or
Mhm.
just reaching out for recovery. I think to tell you the truth, I think that's what God loves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the other thing that many of us become aware of, that I've become aware of, is that in that sense, in that service, it isn't it, that 20th century, 19th century approach to service being savior, like we're going to save somebody, is, really beginning to vanish. And
Mm.
I read a quote not too long ago, and it's an indigenous woman in Australia said, if you've come here to help, if you think you've come here to help, you can get the next plane home. But if your liberation is bound up with mine, then please stay and let's get to work.
Oh my God,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a
So,
statement.
yeah. So that has woven its way into the fabric of like who I'm becoming, because
Beautiful.
that sense of service, it, like we're gonna we have something to offer that other people, that someone doesn't have,
Mm.
is that's an old way of thinking.
Yeah, it's really true. And these days, no matter what you do, no matter what you see, even if you're just on Instagram, be like, stop scrolling. Do you know your answer? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, we're better than this. No, we're even better. Like new, 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 new and improved, new and improved,
Yeah.
new and improved. It's
Mhm.
it's really quite it makes me distraught if I'm too long, if I'm like hanging out too long listening to this kind of
Mhm.
thing. And
Mhm.
I agree with that. I think this inherent true service, and I mean when Prabhupada speaks of service, when he speaks of pure devotional service, and when AA and NA speaks of selfless service, this is an inherent truth that when it's done in the right way, it is exactly what this indigenous woman said. It's not about
Exactly.
helping.
Yeah,
It's about
exactly.
it's so impactful and so important to keep that in
Mm.
the center.
Mm.
So thank you for sharing that. It's really amazing. So are you tell us a little bit about your journey. First of all, how did you get into recovery? Second of all, after you tell us how you got into recovery, what are what is your spiritual background? What kind of like What kind of things have you explored and what have you found?
Oh my
You know?
God. I, boy, I don't know that we have enough time.
I got time. I got time
Oh, it's
until
oh, it's so good. That's such a beautiful question. I'm usually on the other side of the microphone. So
yeah.
to have that question posed is like, wow, I get to stop and think about sharing
Mm.
my journey, which is that's an extraordinary opportunity. And I'm in the
Mm.
experience right now of the gift that my guest may be receiving on a regular basis as we talk together. So,
Yes.
you know, I think I'll start from my recovery and then share a bit of my spiritual journey and my background. But uh, in December of 2011, no, it was Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend of 2011. I woke up from what I hope to God is my last blackout. And, leading up to that point, just about every day for a number of years, I would swear, God damn it, I'm not going to drink today. And then by 11:30 in the morning, I'm thinking, shit, maybe I won't drink very much today. And I would repeat that cycle until I drank myself into a blackout frequently, over and over again. Remember, about 2 years before I got sober, I called one of my younger brothers, who is passed now, but we had partied together. We had been in a couple of bands together. And of course, I would call him looking for help. And I said, Phil, brother, man, I think I've got a problem. And he said, well, what do you mean you've got a problem? What problem? I said, man, I am drinking a lot and I can't seem to stop. And he said to me, Greg, holy shit, man. He said, if you lived anywhere else in the world, nobody would care about how much you drink. It's just our culture. And that was good enough for 2 more years. It was like I set aside my concern and
yeah.
just found a way to keep going.
So you basically found someone to co-sign your BS.
Yeah. And, we're all, most of us are, most of us are pretty skilled that way.
yeah.
We develop some skills. So the difference on that Sunday morning was I woke up without even that resolve in me that I'm swearing off today. Damn it, I'm not going to drink today. And something new showed up for the first time. I don't know where it came from, but there were the names of three guys that I knew, that I had heard had gotten sober. And I had a whisper, a thought, the idea of, Greg, why don't you call Ed and Magnus and Dave? And
The
first of all,
Trinity.
yeah,
The Holy Trinity.
find out if they're still sober. And then you may want to ask them, if they are, how they did it. Took me 4 days, but I called those three guys and all three of them picked up. And they all, for the first time, uh, spoke, shared their experience, strength, and hope. And so I had something new to
Mm.
begin to consider. Wow, maybe there is a way out of this hell. Maybe there really is a way out. And one of those guys, Ed, became my sponsor, my first sponsor. And, as is often the case, the feeling is that man saved my life,
Mm.
because he wouldn't co-sign my bullshit. And,
Mm.
and he held me with a great deal of compassion and understanding.
It's so important.
Yeah, so important. And so that was my second, like, born again experience in my life,
Mm.
because my spiritual journey started when I was about Well, it actually started when I was a really young kid because I was raised Catholic. And, you know, first, second, third grade, I'm thinking, I am going to be a priest. I'm going to be I'm going to be a holy man. And then I turned 12 years old and, you know, the hormones started kicking in and I'm, you know,
You're like,
attracted
what?
to,
Celibacy? What?
yeah, that's exactly what I thought. It's like, I'm not, I'm not going to be able to do what forever.
Ever, never. I never even did it before, but forever, never.
Yeah. So that started to lead me in another direction. And I remember going to, you know, I was raised in the Bible Belt, so ended up going to a church camp and heard a message of, you know, Jesus. And I was captured with the love that this
Mm.
guy talked about that came that was represented in this one, you know, called Jesus.
How old were you at
And
that time?
I was 17. I was in the 70s, you know, part of the Jesus revolution, the happening back then. And I really had an encounter, a spiritual encounter for myself. But over the
Mm.
years, I found myself getting really, really cynical because of what has happened here in America with what has become Christianity, you know, and
Yeah,
I
breaks my
couldn't make,
heart.
I couldn't make sense of things.
Mm.
And I
It's
think,
heartbreaking. It's so
yeah,
heartbreaking.
yeah. And I tried, I really tried to be a faithful follower and a good believer. I did street ministry. I'd take my guitar down to this. I ended up moving to Seattle and I would take my guitar down and do street music and then bring people home to dinner and we, you know, give them a place to sleep and things like that, you know. But the cynicism became too great. And just about the same time when I was in my early 30s, uh, I I found alcohol. You know, I had experimented and explored alcohol. You know, when I was in high school, I my first times of drinking were definitely alcoholic. Go to a kegger, and I'd be the one that would wake up in the woods, and all my friends had gone home. You know, but the faith that you know, that faith community that I was kind of birthed into, it was total abstinence. So I didn't drink for a long, long time. But when, you know, when I found alcohol, it really was the medicine because all of that angst and all of the disappointment and the cynicism,
Mm.
I had some relief from that for a while.
And not only that, just the miseries of this illusionary material world on
Mm,
top of it and not having
mhm,
somewhere to go. I think that's
mhm,
such a painful place to be, whether we know it or not.
mhm,
You know, whether we're aware that it's you know, a lack of whether we're aware we have a God-sized hole or not, and what we're putting in
mhm.
that. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know,
it's a
I
tough
found,
place to be in.
yeah, and I was lost
Mm.
for a long time. You know, couldn't find my way home. And uh and yet there was something still calling me home. And it was really
Mm.
interesting because about 4 or 5 months prior to getting sober in 2011, I started uh I started walking around the house. I was married at the time. I started walking around the house and singing, something's calling me a little bit deeper than I've ever been before. There's a singer-songwriter by the name of Jamie Lula who wrote this song. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
Oh,
And
you have
so
to send that to me, please.
yeah, it goes, something's calling me a little bit deeper than I've ever been before.
Oh, that sounds beautiful.
And then it goes on. And
What a beautiful voice you have.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, and then it goes on, feels like I'm walking on marbles. Can't find uh can't find my feet. Yeah, anyway, it was that, oh my God, please.
Mm.
I'm looking for, it was that God-shaped hole showing back up, and I was calling out in that song. I was just calling out. I didn't know it at the time.
Mm.
And about 4 months after I got sober, my wife, my ex-wife said, I don't know if you knew, I don't know if you're aware of this, but that song, Something's Calling Me, you started singing that about 4 months ago. And something's happened to you.
Wow. It's like
something's
those
something's happened.
vibrations.
Yeah. So it was my mantra. It was the mantra of that deep, deep desire for connection, for something
Mm.
beyond my suffering. And whether it was Krishna or Christ or Yahweh,
It's the universal truth.
Allah, yeah,
It's the
it
universal, innate,
it
inherent truth that we all have,
yeah
even to
it
the littlest drops.
it responded.
Mm.
It showed up, and it's like, so the spiritual path, the spiritual journey since my recovery has, I feel like the prodigal son coming home.
Oh, that's so
But
beautiful.
but that coming home, Jivaji, is I'm coming home to myself.
Oh.
It isn't any longer an intellectual pursuit, a scholarly
Mm.
pursuit. It's
Mm.
it's a like I'm being drawn. It's a heart. It's a deep desire for devotion and service. It's bhakti.
It is. It really, that's so beautiful. I could relate so much to that. It's a yearning. It's an
Mhm.
actual, it's like being dope sick, I have to say. For me, it's like being
Yeah.
dope sick. Like if I
Yeah.
don't have it, I get dope sick. I get literally, I know it sounds
Mhm.
really weird, but it's totally like I yearn for it.
Mhm.
If I'm out of that, and that's what happened to you, you stepped out of that. You stepped out of that call of devotion and love and
Mhm.
service, and you got lost. And
Yeah.
that's what
And
happens to a lot of us. We get
many
lost.
people. Yeah. And you know, I've met many people in recovery that when they were young, there was a deposit of some sense of purpose, some sense of calling, so to use those terms. And then it got snatched out. It's like the backdraft in a fire. It just, all the oxygen gets sucked out and you're lost.
Mm.
Life that you really felt compelled to disappears, and it disappears into the darkness and shadow of sub substance use disorder, self-destructive behaviors, self-sabotage. It's gone for a long time. and
It's
and for me,
almost compulsive, isn't it?
yeah, it is. It's
It's
like that.
obsessive and compulsive.
Yep. And we absolutely get lost, for many of us, for a long time. I was lost for a long time. But there was a piercing, there was a piercing of that veil just enough to begin to, like, hear that invitation
Mm.
again and say, oh hell yes. Oh hell yes.
So how did you, so you're in recovery, you start sort of, so how did it unfold for you? So, we hear when we come into the program, you stepped away from, a higher power, and then you get back into the rooms. You have this Catholic upbringing and a Christian upbringing, and you had lost faith in that. And when you started to come into a 12-step program, how did you navigate through that? You're like, okay, I need a higher power. And you have all these preconceived, learned notions of what God is. Um, how did you get your, and the reason why I ask this is first of all, my own experience is that I had a clear slate.
Mm.
My dad, actually the other way around, I had a lot of things speaking against it. My parents were atheists and really banged it into my head there was no such thing as God. So I went into trying to find a higher power with a lot of shame. It was very shameful for me and embarrassing at that. So, but you came in, and a lot of people do this. They come in with this preconceived notions. I know somebody who's an Irish Catholic. He is 30 years, maybe even 35 years clean and sober. And he, to this day, he cannot even say the word God.
Mm.
Like he won't, he refuses.
Mhm.
So how did you do that?
Yeah, that's interesting because I hear people in that controversy with themselves. You know, they're sharing in meetings, and we're talking about the third step, made a decision to turn our will and our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand God. And they're in such angst and confusion and resistance. And in those times, what I share is, and it's one of the things you have on your podcast logo, the gift of
Gift of
desperation.
desperation.
I
Yeah.
came in so desperate. I didn't give a shit who God was going to be, but I knew I needed a power greater than myself.
Yeah.
And
I
so
came in
so
that way
so
too.
yeah, so I opened my heart and mind up and began to ask, you know, I've had a particular understanding, but if there is a greater understanding that's more authentic for who I am and where I'm at in my life, I'm willing to be open to that. And so thank God for the 11th step, that we get to improve our conscious contact. We get to be engaged in, you know, refining and expanding our connection with this one, you know. In the original Aramaic, in the what's referred to as the Lord's Prayer, it begins with the Aramaic words, which was the language Jesus spoke. It says Abun
Abu.
Dibwashmaya. And that Abun is not, it's not the word masculine father. It
Oh.
is our hearts calling out to something or someone that encompasses all of creation. And
So
Dibwashmaya
deeply,
is,
deeply rooted in Judaism,
yeah,
actually, then,
well, of
yes.
course, you know, why would that be a surprise when Jesus
Yeah,
was a
a
freaking
Jew.
Jewish rabbi, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
A renegade Jew. Yeah,
Yeah,
Jesus,
right.
go, go,
That's
go.
right. Yeah. You know, and to sum up my spiritual path these days and what I'm walking in is, you take any one of the world's religions and then tap into the mysticism, the mystical tradition of that particular religion, and they're all the same. Their desires for experience and not doctrine and not dogma, not rules, not laws. It is our hearts calling out to this one that we perceive at this point in our humanity, we perceive as a little bit separate, but we want union with him or her or it. And our hearts
Yearn for
long,
that.
where
And the thing
we
is,
yearn.
what I love about Bhakti, or, about Gaudiya Vaishnav tradition, is that they say we are part and partial of God. And
Mhm.
also Christianity says that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know.
Jesus's real teaching was, I've shown up to be an example and invite you into the same experience of this one abun that I have. He didn't come to save our asses from some desperate evil thing that we've become. He came because my humanity had arrived at a place of being so wounded we couldn't find our way home.
Yeah. And it's all downhill from there. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the beauty. But every single mystical tradition extends the same invitation. It's such a beautiful invitation.
Can I ask you to define, because I think a lot of people don't understand, or maybe I'm assuming this, but some people would kind of get the wrong idea when you say mysticism. They would think like hocus pocus, or,
right. Yeah.
Some sort of like mystic witchcraft or something. How would you like just define that mysticism of a religion?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I'm going to make probably the best way to do it is to talk about the distinction between what most religions become, and that's a set of laws, an intellectual approach of like fixed beliefs that become concretized, and love goes away eventually.
That's great.
Mysticism is this vital, living sense of an invitation to an experience, to a real experience of love.
So it's like it's experiential. It's experiential religion, experiential reality, spirituality.
Yeah, and it's that sense of contact, connection, and often we don't really have words for it and we don't understand it, but it's what you and I've already talked about. It's that longing. There's something here that's calling us, many of us, and most of us, and maybe all of us, if we're willing to just get quiet for a second and sense that, wow, what is this in me that has a sense of a deeper connection to this life, even not to some disembodied something out there, but to becoming fully human.
I find what you're saying is extremely, extremely helpful, supporting, makes 100% sense in my world. And I realize often that so many traditions, and I will speak of a tradition that I find myself often in, out and around of, the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, they leave no space for quiet. There is no quiet contemplative meditation. There is no 11 step. And that's one of the holes I fill with quiet meditation, with listening, exactly what you're saying, sitting with that, being receptive, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand God, praying only for God's will for us and the power to carry that out. Come on. Come on. Can I live in that step, please? Can that step be the water and I'm in the fishbowl, like, please?
Yeah, right. Oh, that's so good. Yeah. That sense of our culture, our Western culture has us so driven. When I was 29 years old, I forgot to share this. When I was 29 years old, I read a book. I read a book that introduced me to the inner life. And the gentleman that wrote this book, ordering your private world, I'm pretty sure that was the title. And what he suggested was to find journaling and meditation and finding that quiet place. Now that got obliterated throughout a good portion of my life, but I remembered that book as I came into recovery, and I remembered the path of being quiet. And I journal a lot,
That's beautiful.
And I allow whatever guidance or whatever is coming to come through and find itself onto the page.
So tell us, if you would have the perfect day, spiritual day, day of connection, what are the tools that you would be doing? What are the things you would be doing? How would it look like? How would that day look to you?
Wow. Well, I sent you photographs, so it would include.
Okay, I love that photo. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it would include being aware of the incredible privilege of being alive on this planet, as a human being. It would begin waking up early, like I do. I haven't used an alarm clock unless I have to catch a 3 a.m. flight somewhere, but I haven't used an alarm clock since I was a kid. I've just been waking up. I had a morning paper route in Michigan when I was 9 years old. So it just set that biological clock. So I've been waking up between 5 and 5:30.
Could you imagine a nine? I'm
really,
sorry,
really
but
young.
I just have to come back into modern day here. Imagine a 9-year-old doing a paper route these days.
Yeah.
It wouldn't happen.
Right.
It wouldn't ever happen.
No.
Okay. Anyway, guys,
that was my path to financial freedom at 9 years old. Are you kidding me?
My son wanted to do that here too, but they wouldn't let him because here you had to be 18 to do it because they had bad experiences, I guess, with kids just throwing the stuff away or whatever.
So waking up early and then having a time that I just set a timer, cross my legs and breathe. And also was introduced to what's referred to as a heart seed mantra. That I will chant if I begin to kind of get distracted. I come back through that mantra.
So you have a mantra you chant.
Breathe. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
And then I journal, and then I get out and I go for a walk 3 or 4 miles.
Okay, so what's journaling for you? Like, what do you do with journaling? Do you write your thoughts? Do you pray and then let the thoughts come to you and write down whatever you're thinking? Or how does a journal look like? Or is it different every day?
I think it's different every day.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I just let it be different every day.
That's great.
And then, I go out and without earbuds, I go out and listen to the birds. During the wintertime, it's cold. So, I allow myself to be in the experience of feeling this beautiful world, because one of the things that came to me as I found recovery was so much of spiritual emphasis is on trying to transcend this goddamn place, and I'm feeling really called to have both feet on the ground in the earth and take my seat here and know what it is to become a fully embodied human being that spirit has the opportunity to move through at any given moment, so it's a different psychology for me. So when I'm out moving around, I'm being embraced by our mother. And I let myself just be in the experience of being on this earth and how beautiful it freaking is.
Wow.
And then these days, the picture I sent you of Mount Jefferson, I let myself and intentionally look for the beauty in the experience. And it doesn't matter where you're at. You can be in a metropolitan urban setting. There's beauty all around. And the invitation is be curious about how it arrives. So, and then the other thing in a perfect day is I would have the opportunity to be in community of people walking with purpose, either in a recovery circle or sitting one-on-one with somebody that's come into my office or come into my life, curious about their own recovery.
I'm calling this episode Walking with Purpose.
Mm.
Sorry. I have to write that down.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then, I get to go home and, my wife and I share, Jennifer, we share a very, we have, different expressions of our spiritual connection, but it is so complementary, and we get to bless one another with what occurred during our day.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that is such a gift. And then I am tired and I lay my head down on my pillow and I thank God.
That's a nice day. That's
Yeah,
a
it's a
really
good day.
nice day.
That's a good day.
When we spoke about, or when you spoke about rules, regulations, intellectual religion, those, if used wisely, and I think you know this, just like anyone else would know this who is somehow in tune with the divine, they're just but tools and guidelines to use to keep us centered in that, because we can so wander off.
Mm-hmm.
And and I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and I'm gonna say, while picking and choosing the cherries out of everything and putting them into one box and saying, okay, I won't commit to this or I won't commit to that. I'm just going to take the good stuff. That somehow scares me somehow. But at the same time, in a way, I do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and what I don't want to do is bypass anything. And I think that's just what age and wisdom brings, is when we say, okay, here are the tools, here are the rules, the regulations, or the guidelines, or the suggestions, or whatever you want to call them. Here are the things that can keep us connected, and to honor those things.
Mm-hmm.
And not take those things, they're tools, just like a hammer. So we take the tools and we use them to build. We don't use them to hit ourselves over the head with. And that's kind of what religion has turned into. They take the tool.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And they use the hammer to hit the disciples' head over and say, and it's the lack of wisdom. It's not the lack of knowledge. It's the lack of wisdom, experiential.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I will never be a scholar. I don't resonate with that. You'll never, of course, I'll quote Shastra. I can quote the Bible. I can do things like that. I just don't really, unless it really moves me experientially.
Mm-hmm.
So with all of those tools and with all these things that we have, like you said, you can just walk out anywhere and see the beauty. It's like that with anything, and even in spirituality. So if we're looking really for, let's count. Can we even count all of the bad rap that the Catholic Church has, and all the rape cases and the child molestation and everything with ISKCON and all the other, all these institutions, how many horrible things has happened because of the human condition, because of the lack of wisdom and the lack of surrender. And the only rules and regulations and following in the ignorance of us. And I encourage myself to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I want to be forgiven too.
Mm-hmm.
I've never molested anyone. I've never done anything like that, but I've done my bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not as bad as most. I would say a lot. As a woman, I think it's different anyway. As a woman who is a heroin addict, I did a lot of bad things to myself. And of course I did bad things to other people, but it was mostly myself. I didn't go out and rob people. I didn't do things like that. I sold myself to get my money.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things where it's hard to weave that in. But if I'm thinking about the things that we do to ourselves and to other people, from the human condition, from being in a desperate position, no matter if it's on drugs, if it's rage, if it's aggression, if it's obsessive compulsive behavior, whatever that is, often those rules and regulations don't work.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes it worse.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it worse.
Yeah.
We need to tap into that love and
Mm-hmm.
that divine, and then slowly kind of use those tools
Mm-hmm.
in a way. That's why I love a 12-step process, because
Mm-hmm.
there isn't any hammer. The only hammer is myself.
Mm-hmm.
I use it on myself, but there is no hammer. And I did have a sponsor who was, you had a kind sponsor. I had a drill sergeant. I picked a drill sergeant. Of course, I picked a drill sergeant. And I'm talking literally, she was a drill sergeant. And she told me to, call her at 5 a.m. every morning. And I was like, yeah, okay. Never called her at 5. Could never wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I was like, hell no, I'm not doing that. Sorry. Um, yeah. And that's the rules and the regulations thing, like that became like, okay, yeah, that's her thing, but you also have to be sensitive. So it's such a fine dance, a fine, slow dance to kind of figure out what it is that you're taking with you and what you're leaving behind and what you're using and the rules and regulations and the guidelines and the innate love of God and the service and the mysticism plus the rules. It's so delicate.
Yeah. Something comes to mind, and it's if you're going to be a musician,
Mm-hmm.
regarding the rules and regulations that become the tools and the pathway, the discipline, the practice, the learning, the theory, learning those things and then applying them, while it is arduous and it's hell, those early days or weeks of learning how to play guitar or keyboard or whatever, is just, oh my God, I quit. However, as we continue through that process, then something happens and we step into the realm of, without even thinking about it, it's become part of who we are then. And we find liberation on the other side of the rules and
Yes.
regulations. So
I love that.
it's often what we think about the rules and regulations. Two of my teachers right now are two Catholic priests. One is a Jesuit and the other one is a Franciscan.
Love the Franciscans.
Yeah,
And the Jesuits too. Great.
Yeah. So, I mean, and yet they have chosen to stay. One is Greg Boyle, who's in LA working with gang members, and has been there for 30 some years, and just this beautiful work of like igniting the fire within the hearts of of these young people, where the fire is almost gone, and they find their own fire. And he's written a couple of books. The first one was Tattoos on the Heart. Just, if you want it, just, oh my God. And the other one is Richard Rohr. And he introduces us, you introduced me to the Jesus I wish I would have met when I was, and here they are, they're Catholic priests. Come on. And they've chosen to stay within the institution, and yet their voices of truth
and diversity
and diversity
inclusiveness.
Yeah. So yeah, truth is everywhere.
It is. Divine
And
truth is everywhere if it's the truth.
and we get to attune to it. And sometimes it does require a little bit of discipline. I'm not saying
Yes.
that, but that the discipline isn't an end in itself. It is the doorway
Yes.
into the
Absolutely.
liberation,
It's really interesting you're saying that, and it's a beautiful, first of all, I agree with everything, again, of course. Resonate, identify everything. And with, I feel that the capital I, me, the egoic self, sometimes I'm very cautious about when I practice a certain tradition and that there's something that I just can't resonate with and I leave it out and it happens to be one of the cornerstones of the whole religion itself. And it's a really difficult for me. I struggle with saying like, okay, is this the egoic self? Is this me just being defiant? Is it me just being like, why can't I just do it? Just do it, you know? It's not like it's a 5-minute thing. It's a 2-hour a day commitment. And I can't do it. I can't. And actually I don't want to. I just don't want to because I don't relate to it. So
Is that the 8 rounds? 8 rounds
no, it's
of the
16
mantra.
rounds, not 8.
Yeah.
It's 16 rounds.
Oh, that's why I'm not enlightened yet, because I I take the shortcut.
Do you
But
have 108
yeah,
108 beads?
yeah, I wear
Yeah.
it on my wrist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, but there is that, um, yeah, we all get to, each of us get to be, if there is a real sense, and not from a religious standpoint, but there's something in us that's calling us to it, man, I would suggest that we sit down and see what's on the other side of our resistance.
Yeah.
Because we can always, after a period of time, say, no, authentically, this isn't my path. This isn't my truth. And one
Yeah.
of the guiding principles in AA in 12-step is you take what you like and leave the rest. So there is a sense of our agency and our,
Totally.
that.
Yes. And that agency has to be well surrounded by it has to be free from the egoic self, which means it can't be an avoidance for me. And the thing is, I'm just very careful about what I pick and choose, picking the cherries. I'm very, very careful about that because I don't want to, it's not that I don't want to chant. I just don't want to chant 16 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they chant, it's also very disturbing to the mind. It's very fast and very hectic and loud. And I am somebody who's very fiery. We say, I'm fiery in air. I'm Pitta, Vata. And when that just makes me like, I'm like that anyway. So I need the stillness. I need the quiet. And I found ways to do it in a way that's softer.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, the resistance is because the connection that I find that I create with God doesn't happen when I chant. That connection that we were talking about happens when I'm serving, happens when I'm listening, when I'm hearing, when I'm reading, when I'm praying, but not while I'm chanting. I get no connection. I do the chanting because it's required. It's one of those things that's required. It's like when you said about listening to learning music, if I want to speak the language of music and I need to communicate with others who aren't perhaps like I was, I learned music, with ear. And when they tried to get me into music lessons, I was like, nope. So not everybody's like that, but yeah. So it's an important factor to be able to, and that's why we have sponsors, right? And people that we speak to check us if we're not bullshitting ourselves, if we're not, spiritually, if we're not bypassing something that we should be doing or not taking responsibility or making that commitment, Yeah.
Yeah, I still, have a sponsor, a mentor that we speak often, because I am aware that I can bullshit myself pretty easily. I've got
Yeah.
skills.
Yeah. I got skills too.
There's Hafiz, who is a poet in the Sufi tradition, which is Islam's
Mhm.
mystical tradition. He says, I desire to be but a hole in the flute
Mm.
through which through which the Christ breath flows. And
Mm.
we as we walk and refine and are willing to go through some bit of purification and a dismantling of how that powerful egoic drive, that drivenness that's in just about everybody I know. Once, as we're going through this process, there is a sense of being a vessel and allowing, the universe, allowing God to flow through us and create whatever music it's going to create.
That's beautiful. Oh, I love that.
Mm.
Sufi music is also beautiful. I like
Oh
listening to
yeah.
Sufi music. It's so
Mm-hmm.
relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So how did you get into bhakti at all? Like I know I don't know if you would I don't know how if you would identify yourself as a bhakti yogi, but I know that you have delved into that world. So what brought you there and what did you find there?
I was introduced to a young gentleman that had been a monk, actually had been personal assistant, traveled all over the world with Radhanath Swami.
Oh, my
Yeah,
then he would be my godbrother.
yeah. And in fact, the beginning of your podcast has Radhanath Swami in the background talking about the misery of this earthly existence. It's like, yeah, I think I've heard him say that before.
Yeah, it's so
But
funny.
yeah, my friend his name is Balaram Chandra Das, and he uh, we got invited to a group studying the Bhagavad Gita, and we went through the Bhagavad Gita over the course of 3 years,
Oh,
and it
wow.
was such a beautiful
Wow.
experience. Yeah, we went deep,
That's a
and
commitment. 3 years.
yeah, and we hit chapter 12 of the Bhagavad Gita, and it was like it's nothing but you know being introduced to this divine love, this
Mm.
and then Krishna is, he's kind of, I I can almost hear Krishna having fun with everybody because he's giving different examples of the people he loves most, you know. If you do this, I love you most. If you do this,
Yes.
I love you
Love you
most.
most. It's like everybody. I love you all
Yeah.
most.
So by the time you're done, it's like, oh, I think Krishna is pretty much in love with everybody. So I think we're all good.
Yeah.
But and as we were coming to the end of chapter 12, Paula said, moving into chapters 13 through 18, many of you probably won't stay.
Oh.
Yeah. And it was interesting. There were a number of folks that opted out, that didn't
And
continue
why is
through
that? Why do you think that
because
was?
that invitation for the of what bhakti then becomes, um, it requires a little something, something.
Yeah,
And
it's
if it
the
isn't
it's the
from, if
responsibility now. Yeah.
yeah, if it isn't, it can become like dust in your mouth. It can become like, ugh. But there's so much beauty in the faithfulness and in the devotion and in the service. There's so much beauty there. Um, and then that way of being. So bhakti, yeah, absolutely. Bhakti resonates as a way of being for me. Who the Ishtadeva is, who the who that divine personality is, I think it can vary. Because ultimately our deepest desire is to be connected and familiar and present with and presencing the unnamed and, the unmanifest, which is like, yeah, good luck with that. And I think that's what chapter 12 of the Bhagavad Gita is so beautiful, because it says, hey, don't worry about this. It's probably good to be connected to the personality, because the unmanifest is just too goddamn hard.
Oh, it's really hard. I mean, that's why I think a lot of times in Judaism, they don't believe in the picture of God, just as Muslims don't have a picture of God, of Allah. And I think a lot of it's very interesting. If you look in the whole bhakti world, there are so many Jews in there. It's unbelievable. So many renegade Jews. Like half of the movement is like Jewish, the Jewish community. It's really funny because, we really do crave that. If you're I mean, not me, because I didn't grow up religiously Jewish. We were cultural Jews. But yeah, I think humans are not, most humans aren't intelligent enough to, or in tune enough. I wouldn't say intelligent. Prabhupada uses this word intelligent a lot. And I think he doesn't mean it that way. I think he means in tune with the divine.
Yeah, I love Prabhupada. I mean, here he is, 70 years old. He comes to the United States as an elder, as an old man. He ought to be headed out into the woods to spend the rest of his life in contemplation, a sannyasi, right? But he comes to the United States with $70 in his pocket, and he ignites the flame of love and devotion, and providing prasad and meals, and just there is such a beauty in that.
There really is.
And he had quite a personality to go along with that, and some opinions and beliefs. And so, I was so moved by his devotion.
Yeah, his devotion was knitted into into the very fiber of his being, I think he was so devoted and so determined. The determination is amazing. I mean, that kind of determination, it's like when you're like, I don't know, 20, it's like, yeah, big deal. I'll just do whatever. When I was like 15 to 28, I would do whatever. I did not care. But I'm 55 now, and I'm not going to do whatever because I do care. And I think at 70, I'm not going to do whatever. I'm definitely not going to go somewhere and sit somewhere with $12 in my pocket. I'm not doing it, at 70 years old. So it's really quite it's the deep faith. It's the deep faith. And that's what shines so much about him. And that's what keeps me, if I think about that. And that's exactly it. It's the inspiration. It's the Shakti of the Bhakti. It's the Shakti of that Bhakti that inspires me to chant. It's not because chanting 16 rounds is required of me. That doesn't inspire me at all. What inspires me to chant is that Prabhupada has something that I want. He's got that faith and devotion. And this is what he did to get it, right? It's like what we do in the program. How do you get clean? You ask your sponsor, you do what your sponsor did. If you want what we have and are willing to take certain steps to get it. It's really quite simple.
Yeah, beautiful. Wow.
Greg, thank you so much. I feel like at a good natural end right now.
Oh, that's
what do
beautiful.
You think?
Yeah, I'm feeling it. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Let's do part 3. Let's do part 4. Come on again.
We'll do part 3 on one breath, and then we'll come back and do part 4 here.
Yep. No, really, let's do that. I'm serious. I would just love it. So we can just talk about certain topics. So let's let's keep in touch. I want to
Right.
thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to say before we close out?
There's another Hafiz poem that comes to mind that I'll end with, and it says, "A poet is someone who can pour light into a spoon and then lift it to nourish your beautiful parched holy mouth." And
And lift it
that's
to nourish. Say that again.
and lift it to nourish your beautiful parched holy mouth.
Oh my
So
goodness.
yeah, so there's the sense of the pouring the light into a spoon requires us to be able to receive the light, right? But then there's a natural tendency to take that spoon and lift it in service.
Oh,
Yeah, because there are a lot of thirsty people. And I happen to have been one of the thirstiest at the time that I walked into the rooms of recovery, man. Yeah.
oh, that's just amazingly beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. You're welcome.
So, yeah, thanks so much again. Let's,
Yeah. Thank you.
we're just going to keep this going. I want to thank
Yeah.
you again.
I agree. Yeah. Thank you.
Haribo.
Haribo.
This concludes another episode. Thanks for listening. In order for me to serve this community to the best of my ability, I welcome feedback. Please write your feedback at bhaktirecoverypodcast@gmail.com. That's bhaktirecoverypodcast@gmail.com. Also, please don't forget to follow and give us a 5-star rating. Share this with family and friends. If you'd like to join our Bhakti Recovery community or just find out what we're all about, please visit our website at www.bhaktirecoverygroup.com. That's www.bhaktirecoverygroup.com. There are no dues or fees, and we meet daily. If you or someone you know is struggling with addictions and or associated behaviors, you will find links in our show notes to various 12-step programs. Nobody seeking recovery need ever be alone again.
सर्वधर्मान् परित्यज्य मामेकं शरणं व्रज.
The miseries of material existence and the most hopeless conditions of life is the best possible opportunity to turn to God.